May 11th, 2024. Savannah, Georgia. 2:14 p.m. A baby shower in full swing until a champagne glass hits the floor. Guests turn. Someone screams. Because standing in the doorway is a woman no one has seen in 7 years. A woman the town believed had died in a tragic fall off Lookout Mountain. Her name is Valerie Coleman. She's thinner now, scarred, holding the hand of a little boy, a boy who looks exactly like her husband, Robert. Inside the room, Valerie's twin sister, Vanessa, goes pale. Her hand grips her pregnant belly. Her mother gasps. Robert freezes. Because the sister they mourned, the sister they buried without a body, is suddenly alive, and she's not here for a reunion. Outside, an unmarked police car waits, detectives watching the doors. Valerie steps forward. Her voice is calm, cold, certain. "Today," she says. The truth comes out. But how does a dead woman walk into her twin sister's baby shower alive? And what happens when the sister who pushed her off that cliff realizes she remembers everything? To understand what happened on that cliff in 2017, you have to understand Vanessa Coleman. Not the version she showed the world, the capable, dependable twin everyone leaned on, but the woman she was underneath. The one who kept score of every slight, every loss, every moment she felt invisible.
Welcome to True Crime Story Files. Real people, real crimes, real consequences, because every story matters. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, and step inside the world where truth meets tragedy.
Vanessa and Valerie were born 4 minutes apart on a humid June morning in 1989 at Memorial Health University Medical Center in Savannah. Their mother, Dorothy Coleman, a deaconess at First Baptist Church on Chippewa Square, used to tell the story at family gatherings. Vanessa came first, crying immediately, fists clenched tight. Valerie followed, calm and quiet, like she'd already decided the world was safe. Dorothy would laugh and say those 4 minutes set the tone for everything that came after. By the time they hit middle school, the differences were clear. Valerie made friends without trying. She remembered birthdays, asked questions that made people feel seen, moved through rooms like warm light. Vanessa worked harder. She studied longer. She joined every committee, organized every event, made herself indispensable. If Valerie was loved, Vanessa was respected. And respect, she told herself, mattered more. After high school, Vanessa took 2 jobs to pay for nursing school at Georgia Southern University. She worked the morning shift at a Kroger on Abercorn Street and spent evenings as a medical assistant at a walk-in clinic on Victory Drive. She graduated top of her class in 2011, became a registered nurse at St. Joseph's Hospital, and built a reputation as someone who never missed a shift, never complained, never asked for help. Her co-workers admired her. Her family relied on her. And Vanessa needed that. She needed to be the one holding things together. Because if she wasn't, what was she? Valerie, meanwhile, became an elementary school teacher at Ellis Heights Academy. She made less money, worked shorter hours, and seemed perfectly content. She painted on weekends, volunteered at animal shelters, showed up to family dinners with homemade peach cobbler and stories that made everyone laugh. It wasn't that Valerie didn't work hard, she did, but she made it look easy. And to Vanessa, that felt like cheating. Then there was Robert Mitchell. He was an architect who'd moved to Savannah in 2013 to work on historic restoration projects downtown. Vanessa met him first at a hospital fundraiser in January 2014. They talked for over an hour about adaptive reuse of old buildings, about preservation versus progress. He asked thoughtful questions. He listened when she spoke. For the first time in years, Vanessa felt like someone saw her, not as the responsible twin, not as the backup plan, but as herself. She invited him to coffee the following week. He said yes. They met twice more over the next month, conversations that stretched past closing time at the cafe on Broughton Street. Vanessa started imagining a future. She told her mother she'd met someone. She bought new clothes. She let herself hope. Then Valerie came to visit her at the hospital one afternoon in March, and Vanessa made the mistake of introducing them. Robert and Valerie started dating 6 weeks later. Vanessa never said a word. Not to Robert, not to Valerie, not to anyone. She smiled at family dinners. She attended their engagement party in the fall of 2015. She stood beside Valerie at the wedding in April 2016, holding her sister's bouquet of white peonies, watching Robert's face as Valerie walked down the aisle. And something inside Vanessa went cold and stayed that way. People trusted Vanessa's version of events because she'd spent her entire life earning that trust. When she spoke at church meetings, people listened. When she offered advice, people followed it. Her mother called her first when there was a problem. Her friends came to her for clarity. Vanessa had built her identity on being right, on being the one who knew better, who worked harder, who deserved more. And when life didn't reflect that, when Valerie kept winning without even trying, the resentment didn't announce itself with shouting or tears. It settled deep, quiet, and patient, waiting. By the time Valerie announced her pregnancy in January 2017, Vanessa had become an expert at hiding how she really felt. She hugged her sister. She asked about due dates and baby names. She helped plan the nursery. But late at night, alone in her apartment on Whitaker Street, she stared at the ceiling and wondered why everything she wanted kept landing in Valerie's hands. If Vanessa wanted Robert, the attention, and the stability Valerie seemed to collect without effort, how far would she go when her twin sister got them first? While Vanessa was building walls, Valerie was opening doors. She didn't do it for attention or approval. It was simply who she was. The kind of person who remembered the names of her students' pets, who left thank you notes for mail carriers, who could make a stranger feel like an old friend within 5 minutes. Valerie moved through the world with a softness that wasn't weakness. It was strength she didn't need to prove. Her marriage to Robert was quiet in the best way. They'd bought a small craftsman bungalow on East 37th Street in the Starland district, a neighborhood where front porches still meant something and neighbors knew each other's first names. The house needed work. The porch sagged slightly. The kitchen cabinets were from 1987. The backyard was more weeds than grass. But Valerie loved it. She painted the front door yellow. Robert built raised garden beds where she grew tomatoes and basil. On Saturday mornings, they walked to Back in the Day Bakery on Bull Street for cinnamon rolls and coffee, holding hands like teenagers. Robert would later tell investigators that those first 2 years of marriage were the happiest of his life. Valerie had a way of making ordinary moments feel like enough. A Tuesday night cooking dinner together, a Sunday afternoon reading on the couch. She didn't need grand gestures or expensive trips. She just needed him present, and he was. When Valerie found out she was pregnant in late December 2016, she cried in the bathroom of their little house, staring at the positive test for a full 10 minutes before she could move. She'd wanted this so badly it scared her. She wrapped the test in tissue paper, tied it with a ribbon, and left it on Robert's pillow with a note that said, "You're going to be a dad." He called her from work 30 minutes later, his voice breaking. They both cried on the phone, laughing through tears, planning a future that felt impossibly bright. At her first prenatal appointment in January 2017, Dr. Amir Patel at Maternal Fetal Medicine Associates told her she was about 8 weeks along, due in late August. Everything looked healthy. Strong heartbeat, good hormone levels. Valerie left that appointment walking on air, already imagining a nursery, already thinking about names. She wanted to share that joy with everyone, especially Vanessa. But something had shifted between them, and Valerie couldn't quite name it. Her sister showed up to family dinners, but left early. She congratulated Valerie on the pregnancy, but changed the subject quickly. When Valerie suggested lunch or coffee, Vanessa always had a shift at the hospital, a meeting, something that couldn't be moved. The excuses were reasonable, but the distance wasn't. Valerie knew her sister well enough to feel the chill, even when Vanessa smiled. Their mother noticed it too. Dorothy pulled Valerie aside after Sunday service in late February and said, "You need to talk to your sister. She's pulling away, and I don't know why." Valerie promised she would. She just didn't know how to start a conversation about feelings Vanessa refused to acknowledge. So she tried subtler approaches. She texted Vanessa articles she thought she'd like. She invited her to prenatal yoga classes. She asked for advice on baby gear, hoping involvement might ease whatever tension had settled between them. Vanessa responded, but her answers were short, functional, stripped of the warmth they used to share. It hurt in a way Valerie couldn't explain to anyone, not even Robert. How do you mourn someone who's still alive but unreachable? By early March, Valerie was 12 weeks pregnant and desperate to fix what felt broken. She remembered the hikes they used to take as teenagers, back when talking felt easier with trees around them and no one else listening. They'd hiked Lookout Mountain dozens of times growing up, the same trail where they'd scattered their father's ashes after he died of a heart attack in 20. That place held their history, grief and healing, secrets and laughter, everything that made them sisters. On March 8, 2017, Valerie called Vanessa after school and said, "I miss you, Lissa. I really miss you." Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I miss you too." Valerie took a breath and asked, "Can we go hiking this weekend? Just us, like old times. I feel like we keep missing each other, and I don't want that. I don't want us to drift apart." Vanessa hesitated. Valerie could hear something in that silence, something heavy, something uncertain. But then her sister said, "Yeah, okay. Saturday morning?" "Saturday morning," Valerie confirmed, relief flooding through her. "I'll pack snacks. We'll make a day of it." She hung up feeling lighter than she had in months. She told Robert that night over dinner, hopeful and earnest. "I think things are going to get better with Vanessa. We just needed time together, you know. Just the two of us." Robert kissed her forehead and said, "I'm glad, babe. I know how much she means to you." Valerie fell asleep that night, imagining the hike, the two of them talking through whatever had come between them, laughing again, finding their way back to each other. She pictured Vanessa's hand on her growing belly, imagined her sister excited about becoming an aunt, imagined the future they'd share, raising the Gimpy together. She had no idea that the invitation she'd just extended, rooted in love, in longing, in the desperate hope that closeness could heal what silence had broken, would lead her to the edge of a cliff. Did Valerie walk into those woods with her sister, or with her worst enemy? And would she ever make it back out alive? Saturday, March 11th, 2017. Lookout Mountain Trail, Cloudland Canyon. State Park, 9:47 a.m. The morning started the way their childhood hikes always had. Vanessa drove. Valerie picked the playlist. They stopped at a gas station off Highway 136 for bottled water and trail mix, the kind with extra peanuts, because that's what their father used to buy. For the first 20 minutes, it almost felt normal. Valerie talked about the baby, how she'd felt the first flutter of movement that week, like a butterfly trapped under her ribs, how Robert had started building a crib in the garage, even though they didn't know the gender yet, how her students had started calling her Mrs. Mitchell with the baby, as if pregnancy was now part of her name. She laughed telling the stories, her hand resting on the small curve of her belly, 14 weeks along and just starting to show. Vanessa listened, nodded, said the right things at the right times, but her grip on the steering wheel was tight, her jaw set in a way Valerie recognized from childhood, the look Vanessa got when she was holding something back. They reached the trailhead just after 9:30. The parking lot was nearly empty. Early March in North Georgia meant unpredictable weather, and the forecast called for storms later that afternoon. Most hikers stayed home. Vanessa and Valerie had the trail almost entirely to themselves. The first mile was easy, familiar. They'd walked this path so many times growing up that their feet knew the rhythm without thinking. Past the wooden bridge over Bear Creek, around the switchback where wild azaleas bloomed in spring, up the gradual incline toward the overlook where you could see 3 states on a clear day. Valerie tried to talk about other things, work, their mother's upcoming birthday, the leaky faucet in her kitchen Robert kept saying he'd fix, but every topic seemed to hit a wall. Vanessa's responses grew shorter. Her pace quickened. The space between them widened with each step. By the time they reached the halfway point, Valerie was breathing harder than she should have been. Pregnancy had changed her body in ways she was still adjusting to. She called out, "Lissa, can we slow down a bit?" Vanessa stopped but didn't turn around. She stood there, shoulders rigid, staring up the trail. Valerie caught up, concern creeping into her voice. "Are you okay? You've been quiet all morning." "I'm fine," Vanessa said. The words came out flat, mechanical. "You're not fine. Talk to me. Please. That's why we're here, right?" "To talk?" Vanessa finally turned. Her face was unreadable. "What do you want me to say, Val? I want you to tell me what I did wrong. I want to know why you've been avoiding me for months. I want my sister back." Something flickered across Vanessa's expression, something raw and unguarded. Then it was gone. "Let's keep moving. We're almost to the overlook." They walked the last half mile in silence. The sky had darkened. Clouds moved in fast from the west, the kind that meant rain was coming soon. The air felt heavy, charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the weather. The overlook was a rocky outcrop that jutted over the canyon, protected by a waist-high split-rail fence that had been there since the 1980s. This was the spot, the place they'd stood 5 years earlier, releasing their father's ashes into the wind while their mother sobbed, and Valerie held Vanessa's hand so tight neither of them could feel their fingers afterward. This place was supposed to mean something. It was supposed to be sacred. Valerie walked to the edge and looked out over the valley. Fog settled in the low points between ridges. The tops of trees disappeared into gray mist. She took a deep breath and said, "I love this place. I'm so glad we came here together." Behind her, Vanessa stood perfectly still. "I've been thinking," Valerie continued, her voice soft. "When the baby comes, I want you to be the godmother. I want you to be part of everything. I know things have been weird between us, but I just want us back, Lissa. I want us to be close again, like we used to be." Vanessa's voice came out cold. "Back? You want to go back?" Valerie turned. "Yeah, don't you?" "Back to when, exactly? Back when you got everything I wanted? Back when you didn't even have to try and it all just landed in your lap?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Valerie's face shifted from confusion to hurt. "What are you talking about?" Robert, Vanessa said. Her voice was shaking now. I met him first. I talked to him first. I was the one who invited him to coffee, who spent weeks getting to know him, who thought maybe, finally, someone saw me. And then you showed up for 5 minutes, and he forgot I existed. Valerie's eyes widened. Lissa, I didn't know. You never said anything. You never told me you had feelings for him. Would it have mattered? Would you have walked away? Yes, Valerie said, and she meant it. Of course I would have. You're my sister. If I'd known, but you didn't know because you never had to ask. You just take, and everyone loves you for it. You get the guy. You get the easy job. You get the perfect little house and the perfect little life and now the perfect little baby. And I get to work 70 hours a week and smile and pretend I'm happy for you. Valerie stepped closer, her voice breaking. I didn't take anything from you. I didn't know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But we can fix this. We can fix it? Vanessa laughed, sharp and bitter. How, Val? How do you fix the fact that you're everything I was supposed to be? That's not fair. I didn't do this to hurt you. You didn't have to. You just exist, and everything I want finds you instead. The first drops of rain started to fall. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Valerie reached out, trying to touch her sister's arm. Please, we can work through this. I love you. You're my sister. We can... Stop, Vanessa said. Her voice cracked. Just stop. And then something inside her snapped. Later, Vanessa wouldn't be able to explain what happened in that moment. Rage, grief, jealousy, exhaustion, all of it compressed into a single second where thought disappeared and instinct took over. Her hands came up. She shoved. Not hard, not violently, just enough. Valerie's eyes went wide. Her arms flailed, reaching for the fence, for her sister, for anything. Her mouth opened in a scream that seemed to echo forever. And then she was gone. Vanessa stood frozen, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She stared at her own hands like they belonged to someone else. Then she ran to the edge and looked down. The canyon dropped 200 feet. Valerie's body had crashed through tree branches, tumbling down the steep slope. Vanessa could see her sister's pale blue jacket caught on a rock ledge about halfway down, near the creek that ran swollen and fast from recent rains. Valerie wasn't moving. Vanessa's mind went blank. Then it started racing. She looked around. No one else was on the trail. No witnesses. Just her, and the rain, and the sister she'd just pushed off a cliff. She should climb down. She should scream for help. She should call 911. Instead, she ran. She ran back down the trail, her feet pounding against wet rocks, her lungs burning. She ran for nearly 10 minutes before she stopped, gasping, leaning against a tree. Her phone was in her hand. She stared at it. And then she made a choice. She dialed 911. When the operator answered, Vanessa was crying. The tears were real. The panic was real. But the story was already forming, smooth and practiced. My sister fell. Oh my God, my sister fell off the cliff. We were hiking and she was taking a picture and she slipped. Please, you have to help her. Please. The operator asked her location. Vanessa gave it. The operator asked if she could see her sister. Vanessa said no. She'd gone down the trail to get cell service. The operator told her to stay on the line. Help was coming. Vanessa sat down on a wet rock, phone pressed to her ear, and waited. Was this an accident? A terrible, tragic moment of lost control? Or was this the first lie in what would become a 7-year cover-up, built on a sister's silence, and a truth buried as deep as the canyon itself? If you're still here, thank you for watching. Comment where you're watching from. Don't forget to like this video too. Now, let's get back to the story. The 911 call came in at 11:47 a.m. on March 11th, 2017. Vanessa Coleman reported her sister had fallen from an overlook on Lookout Mountain Trail. The recording would later be played in courtrooms and dissected by forensic psychologists. But in that moment, it sounded like exactly what it claimed to be, a terrified woman watching her sister die. Georgia State Park Rangers arrived at 12:33 p.m. Dade County Search and Rescue followed at 1:15 p.m. By 2 o'clock, a full recovery operation was underway. Teams rappelled down the canyon face, searching the steep terrain below the overlook. The rain that had started that morning intensified into a steady downpour, turning the already treacherous slope into slick mud and loose rock. Vanessa stayed at the trailhead, wrapped in a thermal blanket, giving her statement to Ranger Patricia Dawson. She described the hike, the weather turning bad, Valerie wanting to take one last photo before they headed back. She said her sister had climbed over the fence to get a better angle. She said it happened so fast. 1 second Valerie was there, the next she was gone. Vanessa's voice broke on the word gone, and Ranger Dawson reached out to steady her. Detective Luis Herrera from the Dade County Sheriff's Office arrived at 3:40 p.m. He'd worked missing persons cases in North Georgia for 12 years, and something about this one felt off from the start. He couldn't name it yet, just a feeling. He asked Vanessa to walk him through the timeline again. She did, almost word for word what she'd told the ranger. That consistency would later work in her favor. People who are lying tend to add details, change stories, embellish. Vanessa's account stayed steady, but there were small things. Herrera noticed she kept looking at her watch. She asked twice how long the search would take, as if there was somewhere else she needed to be. When he asked about Valerie's state of mind that morning, Vanessa hesitated before saying, she seemed happy, excited about the baby. Robert Mitchell arrived at 4:55 p.m. after a 2-hour drive from Savannah. He'd been at Home Depot buying lumber when Vanessa called. He ran 3 red lights getting to the highway. When he reached the trailhead, he tried to go down into the canyon himself. It took 2 rangers to hold him back. He kept screaming Valerie's name into the rain until his voice gave out. Vanessa hugged him, held him while he sobbed. Detective Herrera watched the interaction carefully. There was something about the way she comforted Robert. Methodical, almost rehearsed. But grief looked different on everyone. He made a note and moved on. The search continued until darkness made it too dangerous. They'd found nothing. No body. No signs of impact. The storm had washed away any blood, any evidence of where Valerie might have landed. The creek at the bottom of the canyon was running high and fast, fed by mountain runoff. If Valerie had fallen into that water, the current could have carried her miles downstream. Day 2. March 12, 2017. Search teams resumed at first light. Dorothy Coleman arrived with Valerie's best friend, Nina Hartley, a 3rd-grade teacher who'd known the twins since kindergarten. Nina told investigators that Valerie had seemed anxious about the hike, worried about the distance growing between her and Vanessa. She said Valerie had texted her that morning, heading up the mountain with Lissa, pray we find our way back to each other. At 2:17 p.m., a search team found Valerie's jacket snagged on a tree branch about 120 feet down from the overlook. The pale blue windbreaker was torn, streaked with mud, but intact. No blood. No body nearby. Day 3. Robert gave a statement. He mentioned tension between the sisters, said Valerie had been trying to fix things for months. Detective Herrera asked if Robert knew what the tension was about. Robert said he didn't. Not exactly. Just that Vanessa had been distant since the pregnancy announcement. Maybe before that, but he wasn't sure. Herrera pulled Vanessa aside, asked if there had been an argument on the trail. Vanessa's face shifted, just slightly. Then she said, "We talked about some things, old stuff, but we didn't fight. We were fine." "What kind of old stuff?" "Family things. Our dad. How much we missed him. Nothing serious." The answer felt too clean, too careful. But Herrera had no body, no witnesses, no evidence of foul play. Just a gut feeling he couldn't put in a report. Day 4. A kayaker found Valerie's phone in the creek, 2 miles downstream from the trail. The screen was shattered, the device waterlogged and useless. Digital forensics later recovered some data, but nothing that contradicted Vanessa's story. The last photo on Valerie's camera roll was a selfie of the twins at the trailhead, both smiling. Day 5. The official search was suspended. The Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency made the call. 5 days, no body, no trail. Storm runoff had likely carried Valerie's remains far downstream, possibly into the Tennessee River system. Recovery could take weeks, months, or never happen at all. It wasn't uncommon in canyon terrain. The wilderness didn't always give back what it took. But the red flags kept piling up in Herrera's notes. On March 14, 2017, 3 days after Valerie's fall, Eleanor heard something that made her blood run cold. A woman had called St. Mary's Hospital in Trenton, Georgia, asking if they had any unidentified pregnant patients admitted with trauma injuries. The caller identified herself as family of a missing woman. She described the missing woman's appearance, gave approximate age and gestational timeline, asked to be notified immediately if anyone matching that description came in. The woman called 2 more hospitals over the next week. Same questions, same urgency. Eleanor had written down the details. She showed Valerie the notebook now, weeks after the baby was born, when Valerie's memories had started coming back in sharper focus. "This woman," Eleanor said carefully, "was she looking for you to save you, or to make sure you stayed gone?" Valerie stared at the notes, the dates, the description that matched her exactly, and suddenly the pieces clicked together. The cliff, the argument, the feeling of hands, not steadying her, but pushing. Her sister's face, twisted with something Valerie hadn't wanted to recognize. Vanessa had pushed her. And then Vanessa had called hospitals to confirm she was dead. Valerie started shaking. "She tried to kill me. She wanted me dead." "Do you know why?" Valerie looked at Jordan sleeping in a basket lined with blankets. "Robert, the baby, everything she thought I took from her." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "If you go back now and she finds out you survived, do you think she'll let you stay alive?" Valerie didn't answer. She didn't need to. They both knew. When survival means silence, when going home means risking your life and your child's life, how do you ever return to the world? And if you do, how long do you wait before the fear finally breaks and the need for truth becomes stronger than the need for safety? For 6 years, Valerie and Jordan lived in the in-between, not quite hiding, but never fully visible. Eleanor had moved them twice, first to a small rental in Ellijay, then to a cabin outside Blue Ridge, always paying cash, always staying off grids that required social security numbers or background checks. Valerie worked under the table at a farmer's market, selling homemade jams and baked goods. Jordan grew up thinking the woods were normal, that other kids lived the same way, that everyone's mom had a scar on her head and a limp she tried to hide. But in October 2023, Eleanor's past caught up with her. Dale Price, her ex-husband, had never stopped looking. He'd tracked her through a property tax record she'd forgotten to scrub, a single mistake in 6 years of careful erasure. He showed up at the cabin on a Tuesday afternoon, drunk and furious, demanding she come home. Eleanor called Valerie from a gas station 20 miles away, her voice shaking. "You need to leave. Tonight. He knows where we are, and he won't stop." Valerie packed everything they owned into 2 duffel bags. She held Jordan's hand and told him they were going on an adventure. He was 6 years old enough to know something was wrong, young enough to trust her anyway. Eleanor went west, disappearing into the network of women who help other women vanish. Valerie went east, back to Georgia, back toward the life she'd lost, and the sister who'd tried to erase her. She found a apartment in Marietta, 30 miles from Savannah, close enough to watch but far enough to stay invisible. She got a job at a bookstore on the square, using identification Eleanor had helped her obtain. Not fake, exactly, but not quite real either. Jordan started first grade at a public school under the name Jordan Price, Eleanor's last name, a small tribute to the woman who'd saved them both. And Valerie started searching. She found Vanessa first, on Instagram. Her sister's profile was public, curated with the kind of careful perfection Valerie remembered from childhood. Photos of morning coffee, sunset walks, inspirational quotes overlaid on soft, focused backgrounds. In June 2019, a wedding photo appeared. Vanessa in white lace, holding hands with a man Valerie didn't recognize. The caption read, "Married my best friend today. Forever starts now." His name was Trevor Dalton, a financial advisor Vanessa had met through a hospital charity event. They looked happy. Vanessa looked happy. Valerie stared at that photo for an hour, trying to reconcile the smiling woman in the picture with the sister who'd pushed her off a cliff. How did someone go on? How did they build a whole new life on top of a lie that big? She found Robert next. He'd closed his architecture firm in 2018, sold the house on East 37th Street, moved to a smaller place on the outskirts of Savannah, near Ardsley Park. His LinkedIn profile said he worked as a consultant now, mostly remote. His profile picture showed a man who'd aged more than 7 years should allow. Gray at the temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a smile that looked like something he'd learned to perform rather than feel. Valerie searched for any sign that he'd moved on. A girlfriend, a new wife. She found nothing. He appeared in occasional photos on mutual friends' pages, holiday parties, work events, always standing slightly apart from the group, holding a drink he wasn't drinking, looking like someone who'd learned to be okay, but never quite got there. She wanted to call him, wanted to show up at his door with Jordan and say, look at what we made. He's alive. I'm alive." But she didn't. Not yet. Because she knew Vanessa was watching Robert too, the way predators watch prey, making sure the threat stays buried. In September 2024, Vanessa posted a photo that made Valerie's hands shake. A pregnancy announcement. Vanessa and Trevor holding a sonogram image, both beaming. The caption, "Our family is growing. Baby Dalton arriving April 2025. We're so blessed." Valerie read the comments. Dozens of congratulations. Her mother's comment, "I'm so happy for you both. Your father would be so proud." Friends from church, from the hospital, from Vanessa's perfectly constructed life, all celebrating. No one mentioned Valerie. No one said, "I wish your sister could be here for this." 7 years had erased her so completely that even her own pregnancy, her own lost child, didn't register as a shadow over Vanessa's joy. That's when Valerie knew she had to come forward. Not for revenge, not even for justice, exactly, but because Jordan deserved to know who he was, and Robert deserved to know his son was alive, and Vanessa needed to face what she'd done before she brought another child into the world, built on lies. Valerie contacted an attorney first, Diane Kemper, a criminal defense lawyer in Atlanta who specialized in cold cases and delayed disclosures. Diane listened to Valerie's story, took notes, asked careful questions about evidence, timelines, witnesses. Then she made a call to the Dade County Sheriff's Office. Detective Luis Herrera was still there, still working cold cases. When Diane told him Valerie Coleman was alive, there was a long silence on the line. Then he said, "I knew something was off. I knew it." They met twice, once in Diane's office, once at the sheriff's department. Herrera pulled the original case file, reviewed his notes from 2017, listened to the 911 call again, with Valerie sitting across from him. He told her what he needed. A confession. On record. We have circumstantial evidence. Your survival, the hospital calls, the inconsistencies in her story. But we need her to admit what happened. Can you get her to talk? Valerie said yes. She didn't know if she could. But she said yes. Herrera was firm. Don't confront her alone. Don't go anywhere private. We need witnesses, or at minimum, a recording. Georgia's a one-party consent state. You can record her without her knowledge. But you need to be safe. If she tried to kill you once, she'll try again, Valerie finished. I know. Diane helped her buy a digital voice recorder, small enough to fit in a purse, strong enough to pick up conversation from across a room. They practiced role-play scenarios, how to steer the conversation, how to stay calm, how to get Vanessa talking without spooking her. And then Valerie waited. In late October, Vanessa posted about her baby shower. May 11th, 2025. River Oaks Country Club. 2 o'clock. Public event. Lots of witnesses. Perfect. Valerie called Herrera. I know when I'm doing this. He assigned 2 plainclothes officers to wait outside. Told her to text him a code word if things went wrong. Made her promise she'd leave if Vanessa became aggressive. Valerie agreed to all of it. Then she went home and held Jordan while he slept, studying his face, memorizing the way his eyelashes curled, the freckle on his left cheek, the small scar on his chin from falling off a swing last summer. She thought about all the moments Robert had missed, first steps, first words, first day of school, all stolen because Vanessa couldn't stand to lose. On the morning of May 11th, 2024, Valerie dressed Jordan in his best clothes, khaki pants and a button-down shirt Eleanor had bought him for Christmas. She braided her own hair the way she used to, the way Vanessa would recognize. She put the recorder in her purse, checked the battery twice, and drove to Savannah. Valerie was ready to reveal herself. She was ready to face her sister, her mother, Robert, the life she'd been erased from. She was ready to tell the truth. But was Vanessa ready to face what she'd done? And when the ghost you thought you'd buried walks back into your life, what do you do when there's nowhere left to run? The country club manager led them to a private sitting room off the main hall. Neutral beige walls, leather chairs, a door that closed with a soft, final click. Vanessa stood near the window, her hand pressed against her pregnant belly, her face the color of old paper. Dorothy Coleman sat in the corner, clutching her purse like it might anchor her to reality. Robert stood by the door, unable to move, unable to look away from the boy holding Valerie's hand. Valerie's voice was steady. We need to talk about what happened on that mountain. Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're alive. How are you alive? That's not the question you should be asking, Vanessa. The question is why you thought I was dead and never told anyone you pushed me. I didn't push you. The words came fast, automatic. You slipped. It was an accident. The rain, the rocks. Stop. Valerie's voice cut through the room. I remember. It took time, but I remember everything. The argument. What you said about Robert. The way you looked at me right before your hands hit my back. Vanessa shook her head, frantic. No, you're confused. The fall, you hit your head. You don't remember it right. I remember you saying I took everything you wanted. I remember you shoving me, and I remember waking up in a creek, wondering why my own sister would rather see me dead than watch me be happy. Dorothy made a sound like something breaking. Vanessa, tell me this isn't true. Vanessa turned to her mother, tears streaming now. Mama, she's lying. I would never. She fell. I tried to help her. I called 911. I did everything right. Valerie reached into her purse, pulled out a folder, opened it calmly. Then explain why you called 3 different hospitals in the week after I fell, asking if they had any unidentified pregnant trauma patients. Vanessa went still. St. Mary's in Trenton, Hamilton Medical Center in Dalton, Erlanger in Chattanooga. You used your real name at one, gave a callback number at another. You weren't looking for me because you wanted to find me. You were making sure I stayed gone. That's not. I was trying to help. I thought maybe. You thought maybe I survived, and you needed to make sure I didn't. Vanessa's attorney training kicked in. The deflection strategies she'd watched enough true crime shows to know. The trail was dangerous. You were pregnant and shouldn't have been hiking. You climbed over the fence even though I told you not to. This is on you, Valerie. You put yourself in that position. Valerie's jaw tightened. So now it's my fault you pushed me? I didn't push you! Then why did you run? Why didn't you try to climb down? Why did it take you almost 15 minutes to call 911? Vanessa's breath came faster. I panicked. I was scared. I thought you were dead, and you what? You saw an opportunity? No. Vanessa pressed her hands to her face. You don't understand. You've never understood. Everything just falls into your lap. The job you love. The husband who adores you. The pregnancy that happened the first time you tried. I worked for everything. I fought for everything. And you just existed and got it all anyway. So you decided to take it from me? I decided, Vanessa's voice cracked. I decided I was tired of being invisible. I was tired of watching you win. The door opened. Robert stepped fully into the room, his eyes locked on Jordan. The boy looked up at Valerie, confused, scared. She squeezed his hand. Robert's voice came out hoarse. Is he? His name is Jordan, Valerie said quietly. He's 7. He was born 4 months after the fall. He's yours, Robert. He's ours. Robert's legs buckled. He caught himself on the arm of a chair, staring at the boy. The slope of his nose, the way he tilted his head when confused, exactly the way Robert did. 7 years. 7 years of this child's life, stolen. First steps, first words, first day of school. All gone. And the woman who took them was standing 10 feet away, pregnant with another man's child, living the life she'd murdered Valerie to claim. Dorothy stood, her voice breaking. Vanessa, please, tell me you didn't do this. Vanessa looked at her mother, at Robert, at Valerie, at Jordan, and something inside her finally shattered. I snapped, okay? The words came out raw, loud, stripped of all pretense. I snapped. We were standing there and you were talking about the baby and asking me to be the godmother, and I couldn't take it anymore. You took everything. The man I loved. The life I wanted. Even the baby should have been mine. I worked harder. I deserved it more. And you just got it because people liked you better." The room went silent. Vanessa was crying now, ugly and real. "I didn't mean to kill you. I just wanted you to stop. I wanted you to stop winning. And then you were falling, and I knew it was over. I knew I'd destroyed everything. So I ran. I called 911, and I made up the story. And I thought if you were really gone, maybe I could finally breathe." Robert's voice was barely a whisper. "You took my wife. You took my son. You took 7 years. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back." The door opened again. Detective Luis Herrera stepped inside, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. He looked at Valerie. She nodded. Herrera turned to Vanessa. "Vanessa Coleman Dalton, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of Valerie Coleman and assault on a pregnant woman. You have the right to remain silent." Vanessa's scream cut through the words. "No, no, please. I'm pregnant. You can't." "Mama." "Tell them." But Dorothy turned away, her face buried in her hands. They handcuffed Vanessa carefully, mindful of her belly. She sobbed as they let her out, her perfect life crumbling with every step. Guests in the main hall went silent as she passed. Cameras flashed. Someone gasped. Trevor stood frozen near the gift table, holding his pregnant wife's baby shower crown, watching the woman he thought he knew disappear into the back of a police car. Valerie stood in the doorway, holding Jordan close, watching her sister leave. She felt Robert's presence beside her, solid and broken and real. "Is it over?" Jordan whispered. Valerie kissed the top of his head. "The truth is out. That's a start." But would the truth be enough? Vanessa's lies were exposed, her confession recorded, her arrest witnessed by dozens. But courts don't run on emotion. They run on evidence, procedure, reasonable doubt. Would 12 strangers see attempted murder or a tragic accident compounded by panic and years of lies? The real trial was just beginning. The trial of Vanessa Coleman Dalton began on September 9, 2024, in the Superior Court of Dade County, Georgia. Judge Margaret Holloway presiding. The courtroom was packed. Local news cameras lined the hallway. Court TV sent a correspondent. The case had everything the media loved: identical twins, betrayal, a baby shower reveal, and a question that haunted everyone who heard it. How does someone push their pregnant sister off a cliff and live with it for 7 years? The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Kenneth Bryce, a 20-year veteran who'd built his reputation on methodical case building and emotional restraint. He opened with a timeline. March 11, 2017. 2 sisters, 1 cliff. A fall that was supposed to look like an accident, but was really attempted murder motivated by jealousy, resentment, and rage. The defense was headed by Patricia Gaines, a criminal attorney from Atlanta, known for taking impossible cases and finding reasonable doubt in the smallest cracks. Her strategy was clear from the opening statement. Yes, Vanessa pushed her sister. But it wasn't attempted murder. It was a momentary lapse, a tragic accident born from emotional breakdown, not criminal intent. Manslaughter at most. Not the calculated killing the prosecution wanted the jury to believe. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, Valerie sat in the front row, Jordan with his grandmother at home, Robert beside her. Both of them listening as their lives were dissected for 12 strangers to judge. Eleanor Price took the stand on day 3. She was 70 now, grayer than she'd been when she found Valerie in the woods, but her voice was steady. She explained how she discovered Valerie half-drowned, unconscious, 14 weeks pregnant. How she treated her injuries with limited supplies. How she delivered Jordan in a cabin with no electricity, no backup, Nothing but instinct and prayer. Gaines cross-examined carefully. Ms. Price, you didn't take Valerie to a hospital because you yourself were hiding from an abusive ex-husband, correct? Correct. So your decision to keep her hidden had as much to do with your safety as hers? At first, yes. But when I showed her the hospital records, the calls asking about unidentified pregnant trauma patients, she knew going back could get her killed. Or she was confused. She'd suffered a traumatic brain injury, memory loss. You said so yourself. How do we know her version of events is reliable? Eleanor didn't flinch, because I watched her remember, piece by piece, and every detail matched what the evidence showed. Robert testified on day 5. He described his marriage to Valerie, the pregnancy announcement, the joy they'd felt planning for a future that never came. He talked about the phone call from Vanessa, the frantic drive to the mountain, the search that found nothing. He described 7 years of grief, of visiting the Overlook on their anniversary, of wondering if his wife had suffered when she fell. And then he described May 11th, 2024, walking into a room and seeing his son for the first time. A boy who had his face, his mannerisms, his love of building things. 7 years stolen because Vanessa couldn't stand to lose. Bryce asked, "Did the defendant ever express remorse to you?" Robert's voice was cold. She cried when they arrested her, but she didn't apologize. Not once. Not for taking my wife, my son, or 7 years I'll never get back. Tom Brennan testified on day 8, the hiker who'd been on a connecting trail that morning. He explained what he'd heard. 2 women arguing, voices raised, one of them shouting something about everything and always. He couldn't make out exact words, but the tone was unmistakable. Anger, confrontation. Not the calm photo-taking moment Vanessa had described. Gaines tried to poke holes. You were how far away? Maybe 200 yards? Through trees, in the rain. And you're certain it was them? I heard 2 women arguing. The timeline matches, and there's no one else it could have been. On day 10, forensic expert Dr. Raymond Okoro took the stand. A biomechanics specialist from Georgia Tech. He'd analyzed the fall site, the angle, the injuries Valerie sustained. He showed the jury simulations. Based on the trajectory and impact points, Dr. Okoro explained, Valerie would have needed significant force to clear the fence and fall at the angle she did. A slip would result in a more vertical drop. This was horizontal propulsion consistent with being pushed. The 911 call was played on day 12. The courtroom went silent as Vanessa's voice filled the room. Panicked, breathless, convincing. She slipped. Oh my God, she slipped. Please send help. But then Bryce played the timeline. The call came in at 11:47 a.m. Vanessa claimed the fall happened around 11:30. 17 minutes. What took her 17 minutes to call for help? Phone records from March 2017 were entered as evidence. 3 hospitals, 3 calls, all asking about unidentified pregnant trauma patients, all within a week of the fall. Gaines argued it showed concern, not guilt. Bryce argued it showed Vanessa making sure her crimes stayed hidden. The recording from the baby shower was played on day 15. Vanessa's voice, raw and unfiltered. I snapped, okay? You took everything, even him. Even the baby should have been mine. Gaines fought hard. My client was in shock, ambushed. She'd just seen her sister she believed was dead. Those words were trauma response, not confession. But Bryce hammered the point home. She said the baby should have been hers, not, I'm glad you're alive, not, I'm sorry. She said the baby should have been hers. That's motive. That's intent. Vanessa took the stand on day 17. Gaines had advised against it, but Vanessa insisted. She wanted the jury to hear her side. She cried through most of her testimony, explained the jealousy, the miscarriages, the feeling of being invisible her whole life. She admitted pushing Valerie, but swore it was impulse, not intent. I didn't want her to die. I wanted her to stop. I wanted everything to stop. And then she was falling, and I knew I'd done something I could never undo. Bryce's cross-examination was brutal. If you didn't want her to die, why didn't you call for help immediately? I panicked. For 17 minutes? I wasn't thinking clearly. But you were thinking clearly enough to call hospitals later to make sure she stayed missing. I was scared. I thought if she was alive, I'd go to prison. I thought my life was over. So you chose to let her stay dead. Let her husband grieve. Let her son grow up without his father. You chose that for 7 years. Vanessa didn't answer. The jury deliberated for 4 days, longer than expected. Sister cases are complicated. Psychology plays a role. Intent is hard to prove when emotions run high. On September 30th, 2024, they returned a verdict. Guilty. Attempted murder. Assault on a pregnant woman causing injury to the fetus. Judge Holloway scheduled sentencing for October 15th. Vanessa gave birth to a daughter in custody on October 3rd. Trevor took the baby home alone. At sentencing, Valerie read a victim impact statement. She described 7 years of survival, a son who didn't know his father, a life stolen because her sister couldn't stand to lose. Judge Holloway sentenced Vanessa to 15 years in state prison, eligible for parole in 12. The defense's successful argument that Vanessa's confession showed remorse, combined with her lack of criminal history, resulted in a sentence on the lower end of the guidelines. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. The community was split. Some saw justice. Others saw tragedy. 2 sisters destroyed, 2 families broken, and a system that couldn't heal what it punished. Valerie stood on the courthouse steps, Robert and Jordan beside her, and said only this: "The verdict doesn't give me back what I lost, but it tells the truth. And sometimes that's all you can ask for." Justice was on paper. 15 years. A guilty verdict. A sister behind bars. But the real damage ran deeper than any sentence could reach. How do you repair 7 years? How do you explain to a child why his aunt tried to erase him? And how do you move forward when the past refuses to stay buried? 25. 6 months later, in the backyard of the house on East 37th Street, Jordan chased a football across the grass. Robert jogged beside him, laughing when the boy dodged left and sprinted past. 7 years of missed moments couldn't be recovered, but this, right now, was real. On the porch, Valerie sat with her mother. Dorothy held sweet tea she hadn't touched, watching her grandson play. "He looks happy," she said quietly. "He is," Valerie replied. "Most days." Dorothy visited Vanessa once a month at Pulaski State Prison. Valerie didn't go. Some bridges burned too completely to rebuild. Trevor Dalton sat in his apartment, his daughter asleep in his arms. She had Vanessa's eyes. He tried not to see that, tried not to wonder if the woman he'd married had ever really existed, or if she'd been performing the whole time, playing the role of someone who deserved love. He'd filed for divorce from prison, signed away 2 years of his life like they'd never happened. But his daughter was real, and she deserved better than a mother in prison and a father who couldn't look at her without remembering the lie. At the prison, Vanessa stared at an old photograph, her and Valerie at 16, arms around each other, laughing. She had 12 years left to think about the 17 minutes she didn't call for help. 12 years to live with what she'd done. Back on East 37th Street, Jordan called from inside. "Mom, dinner's ready." Valerie stood in the front yard, sunlight on her face. The fall didn't kill her. The lie almost did. Telling the truth didn't fix everything. It didn't give back the years or heal the fractures, but it gave them something they didn't have before. The freedom to stop pretending. She walked toward her son's voice, toward a life that was messy, imperfect, and finally real. If this story made you think, like the video and subscribe. And tell us, have you ever had someone close to you betray you? How did you rebuild trust? Comment below. We'll see you in the next one.